Welcome to Buckets, your daily NBA betting podcast, live from the Tommy John home studios. I'm a Tommy John's guy myself, so I can speak to the comfort and versatility of a Tommy John garment. We've got best bets. We're in, we're out. I'm the host today, Brandon Kravitz, pinch hitting for Matt Moore, who's out covering Nuggets Kings tonight. But here with me is the always sharp Bryan Fonseca, at Bryan Fonseca NY on Twitter. We've got best bets to get to for the January 24th slate in the association. It's a limited slate, but we've still got plays for you. And a reminder that everything that we talk about today can be found in the award-winning Action Network app, as well as quick slips for our picks today in the episode description. I saw you were on the under for Portland, Orlando, which was tonight as of our recording. 212.5, and the game finished at a nice balmy 180. So You're seeing the board, my friend.
Yeah, and Giannis couldn't get the rebounds and assists, the 18.5, because they just whooped the Heat's ass. They got off that plane late and they were pissed, and yeah, Giannis just wasn't able to play enough in the fourth quarter. Didn't need to.
Yeah, he had looked like he was tracking with the rebounds. I saw that one in the app as well. You guys can tail or fade all of this. Bryan, we're a couple of weeks away from the trade deadline, and we're getting more whispers and rumors about Jimmy Butler. He's now been suspended again by the Miami Heat. Do you get the sense that this is going to be an eventful trade deadline, or is it going to be Jimmy Butler and bust as far as everything that we see in the league?
It's funny because Matt and I were talking about this last week on my YouTube channel, which is just at my name. And we talked about the trade deadline extensively. And one of the things I pointed out was that it's been several years since we've had a trade deadline with fewer than 10 trades. So it's been active for about 7-8 years or so. And this year it's scary because of the second apron, because of the limitations and teams not wanting to screw themselves from a salary cap standpoint. But there will still be trades made. I don't know about the volume or the excitement. There are a lot of names circulating right now. There aren't a lot who can maybe shift the title, we think, but I think Jimmy Butler is one of those guys. The problem is he wants to go to Phoenix. And I don't think that's going to make a dent in the NBA title race if he does get what he wants. If he was open to going to, say, a Memphis, for example, and Memphis would execute a Jimmy Butler trade without having to gut too much of their team, without having to trade one of their big three, I think that would be very interesting to pair Jimmy Butler with Desmond Bane, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, etc. The problem is Mark Spears comes out today and says he wants to play anywhere but Miami, and apparently not Memphis either. And there's been reports about him wanting Phoenix. He wore Phoenix Suns colored sneakers last game that he played. I don't know about wanting to play anywhere, so to speak. But if that's the case, then I expect that the Heat may take him up on that and send him somewhere else. It's just another team has to be willing to trade for him. But why would you want to do that? So it's very complicated. And then you have other guys like Bradley Beal, for example, Zach Lavine. Like, what are these guys going to do? Bradley Beal, to me, holds like the key to the trade deadline because he has a no trade clause. And if he just continues to say no, then maybe everything is just uneventful from there.
It just feels like none of these teams are a Jimmy Butler away. I don't know that the way that the league is tracking right now with, I mean, at this time of the year, if you're going to make a deal.
You don't think Memphis would be?
I mean, I think as far as what he could bring to help push a team over the top. When I was looking at teams across the league, I said, okay, who needs to make a trade if they want to genuinely be more of a contender than what they currently are? And I would say Memphis is one of those teams, but I'm kind of striking them from the list because he doesn't want to go there. So I'm not sure that it matters.
Yeah.
But a team like Milwaukee, do I feel like Milwaukee, is my outlook totally different on them with Jimmy Butler in the door compared to what it is right now? I would say not really. And then you look at a team like Phoenix. Like, Phoenix is still going to struggle to make the playoffs with Jimmy Butler on the roster. And then a team like Houston, it's like you're messing up the dynamic too much. They're the 2 seed right now. They're something's working with the young core that they have. I don't feel like teams are a Jimmy Butler away, and teams at the deadline that are going to be active, they're all looking for the same thing. They want more defense. They want more threes.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy Butler brings like half of those. So I don't think that we're going to see Jimmy Butler change the outlook on the way that we see some of these teams moving forward.
I think putting him on the Bucks is interesting because you would swap out. It'll be a Middleton Portis conceivably, right? Like if we're just playing with the trade machine here, it would be some version of Middleton Portis. There have been rumors about them moving Connaughton. I'm not sure Connaughton is going to get you anything, so he would have to be packaged into something like this. But if you're putting in Jimmy and Middleton's out, Portis is out, like that's interesting to me. And it's also ironic because the Heat potentially sending him there of all places, which I'm sure they don't want to do that. So that's part of it too. There's been back and forth rumors about, hey, he'd play for Milwaukee. No, he wouldn't. There's also been back and forth rumors about Bradley Beal and whether or not he played for Milwaukee. Gambo, who does radio in Phoenix, says that Bradley Beal would waive his no trade clause to play there. And Chris Haynes came out and said, like, no, he doesn't want to play in Milwaukee. Essentially. So, like, these are two guys with credibility, like with legitimate sources. So it's like, that means somebody's trying to push something that isn't real. We just don't know who, and not of the reporters. I'm talking about who they're talking to, because a lot of people just want to throw things out there. I think Lavine is an interesting one, and this is an opportunity where the Bulls could actually sell at a point where Lavine's value is higher than it used to be, and the contract is not done, but there's a year, and then there's a player option after this. So you have him through 26 and then a player option for 26, 27. A team like the Orlando Magic, I feel like they
just scored 79 points, so talk to me about this.
Like, I'm curious because like Orlando is one of these teams to me, if we're just looking at futures, for example, and who can break through. I think Cleveland's legit, and obviously Boston's legit. I think the Knicks are legit. Their defense is shaky. And Orlando can give these teams problems, as we talked about on the show last week. But do you think Orlando are they just going to stand pat here and just kind of ride it out now that they got their guys back? Or are they going to get a little aggressive here? Because I feel like they have the contracts to do something aggressive if they want.
They do. It's not an aggressive front office, so I have a hard time predicting that they're going to do something as earth-shattering as trading for Zach Lavine and having to move the pieces in order to bring in somebody like that. It would be a great move for what they need, which is a lot of scoring, because they lack that in a big way. But I feel like the problem with them is more insidious than one player can correct. And maybe Zach Lavine would be the outlier to that, but I think they need to reassess a lot in the offseason, see how far this group can take you, and then go from there, because and this is where I fall with a number of teams in the league. Yeah, you could get aggressive at the trade deadline, but for what? What are you actually accomplishing? If the Magic had Zach Lavine, are they legitimately championship contenders? Because if the answer is no, then you're just making a trade to make a trade or to push one extra round into the playoffs. I'm not sure that they realistically think they're there. Zach Lavine on the Magic makes them better, but does it make them competitive in a 7-game series with Cleveland or with Boston or Milwaukee? I don't think I'm ready to go there yet. And I would think the front office is thinking along those same lines.
Yeah, because I think, well, one, I'm not like a super big, like Matt's higher on Zach Lavine than I am personally. And I think looking at Orlando, the advantage they sort of have is everyone they have under contract this year, uniquely, like they don't have really any expiring contracts. If you look at their roster, which is advantageous to them. Like Jalen Suggs' extension kicks in next year. That's a point for not wanting to do a Zach Lavine type deal, because you're going to have more money on your books anyway. And, that can complicate things. You're a year away from a Paolo Banchero extension kicking in. Like he's going to get his deal this summer. Franz Wagner already got his. His is going to kick in the same time as Jalen Suggs. And, Jonathan Isaac, uniquely, his deal is going to reduce. And that's probably one of the contracts that you would try to move off of. But, I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe you wait till it's at 15, because then another team will probably feel like, all right, we can take this now, as opposed to him at 25 this year and then going 4 more years on the deal. Like, I think there's a lot Orlando could potentially experiment with. But, yeah, maybe because they're so young, and mainly their 2 stars are so young, that maybe the move is just to wait, because you're going to have all the salary anyway. Like, you saw what you could do last year, and this year you've been banged up. Maybe see what you could do in an Eastern Conference that there is a clear, I think, top 3 right now. But I think it's clear that Orlando, and I don't want to disrespect Milwaukee. Milwaukee's up there too, and they're probably going to be aggressive at the deadline. But it's worth seeing like what Orlando could do, like make it to the playoffs again. You know what I mean? Can you win a series this time, and then sort of reassess from there? I think you're right about like how they should kind of play their timeline, especially considering they could easily do something this summer.
Yeah, no fan wants to hear that. Nobody who's following the league without a dog in a fight wants to hear that, because it's boring. But the best thing they can do is say, it's Paolo and Franz's team. You have to see how far they can take you, and then you have to truly assess. Last year was just about getting the experience. This year is about how far can these two actually take you, and then figure out what you actually need and go from there. Real quick, there's one more thing I want to hit on before we get to our best bets. I know everybody is on the edge of their seats. So we got some good ones for you. I'm looking at the odds to make the playoffs, and the Western Conference is so fascinating to me this year. And one of the teams that we just mentioned was the Phoenix Suns. They are minus 110 to make the playoffs this season. Right now, they're the final seed in the play-in. Now, keep in mind, if you're betting a team to make the playoffs, the play-in isn't good enough. You got to win your way into one of the top 8 seeds in order for that bet to cash. I'm not really trying to lay minus 110 at this stage in the season, but if they get Jimmy Butler, perhaps that's good value. Where do you land on that? And then I'm also looking at Golden State at plus 152 on FanDuel, just given the fact that they might be one of those teams that gets aggressive in the waning years of Steph Curry.
Yeah, I think so. I like looking at bets like this, bets like futures around this time. And as I've mentioned before, just banking on front offices. Like, who are the front offices I think will get aggressive so that this number actually sort of increases in value, so to speak. Like, if Phoenix gets Jimmy Butler tomorrow, this is not going to be minus 110 anymore. This is going to be more. This is going to have more juice on it, right? Because you'd be swapping Bradley Beal in for Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler will help. He's not going to. I don't think he's going to give them a championship or anything like that, but like with the right matchup, you can win a playoff series. In Miami, when Jimmy Butler was leading the Heat in a playoff series, you kind of always felt like they at least had a chance given what he was doing there. And they surprised people along the way. I'm not sure how much of that is still left at 35 post injuries and things of that nature. And at this stage, but with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Jimmy Butler, I feel a lot better about them than with the current iteration of what they have out there. All due respect to Bradley Beal, of course. And Golden State, yeah, that's an interesting one because, if they made a deal, I don't know what that is. That's probably the hard part. They don't seem like they're in a rush to move on from, say, an Andrew Wiggins, whose contract you would almost definitely need for something big. But they clearly have things they can do if you just look at their cap sheet. But it's hard to make trades. And they're a team that doesn't have a ton of flexibility right now. They have some interesting young players. But Jonathan Kuminga, who's playing well before he got injured, he's been out with an injury. And he's supposed to come back pretty soon. But we don't know what that's going to look like. Moses Moody's actually been playing more minutes lately and has looked all right. And then sort of looking at this from an Eastern Conference perspective, the fact that Philadelphia is plus 250 to make the playoffs right now, as somebody who had them at plus money early on to make the play-in, I kind of want them to at least make the play-in. But I don't know if they're good. We're approaching lost season territory with them if Joel Embiid can't string together some games. And I don't know. And the interesting long shot here is Chicago at plus 790 to make the playoffs, because it's like, all right, if the Heat execute a Jimmy Butler deal and not a lot's coming back, can they just fall out of it entirely? Right? Like that's something that's interesting. Could Chicago potentially like go on a little bit of a run if they make a certain move? I don't know what direction they're going to go in. It seems like guys are for sale, but I don't know. There's so much unpredictability there. I don't feel the need to move on that even as a long shot at plus 790. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're going to end up in a tough play-in matchup to open this thing up, because the 7-8 in the Eastern Conference is going to be a viable team. It's going to be some combination of the Pacers, Pistons, Magic, healthy-ish, you would think at the time, the Atlanta Hawks, and I like all of those teams better than Chicago, especially if Chicago is going to sell at the deadline. I know that's a hard thing for them to do because of the Zach Lavine contract, and I don't know how many teams out there are just dying to have Nick Vucevic. He's great in fantasy basketball. In real life, he's not a winning basketball player, but this is where we're at. Let's get to our best bets for the 3-game Friday slate. My best bet is the Southeast Slayers, the Portland Trailblazers, +5 at the Charlotte Hornets. What you got, Brian?
In that game, I have the under 222 total. We'll get into why. And I was toying with it. I was thinking about it, but I ended up taking it a player prop before we started, even though I feel like it might be a trap, but we're gonna take it anyway. Jaylen Wells over 11.5 points, suspiciously at plus money as of this recording at one popular sports book.
Yeah, that's shocking given his recent run and over his last I got the numbers here. Over his last 8 games, he has scored in double figures 5 times while averaging 14 points per game over that span. He averages over 11 on the season. He's been one of the most sensational rookies on the season in a year where the rookie class is a little underwhelming, but he's been part of the starting lineup for at least the last couple of weeks. So why don't you start there? Go ahead and give us the cap on Jaylen Wells over 11.5 points scored.
Yeah, I mean, Memphis has the important guys playing, and he's starting with them, still getting this. Like, he's been in lineups with John Morant, Jared Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, and he's gotten over 11.5 in 7 of 10. So I was kind of like, wait, why is this plus 100? Granted, at another book, it's minus 130, you know? So somebody's off here. And I'm looking at this, and sometimes you look and I'm like, why is this line like a little too good to be true? Like, what's going on here? What is Vegas trying to tell me? But ultimately, like, Jaylen Wells, I mean, he had a 30-point game 3 weeks ago. He's been in the teens. He's been living there, as you mentioned, lately. He's got this over in 7 of 10, as I mentioned. He's also done it in 3 straight. And he's getting the minutes and he's getting the opportunities. Like, in all of these games, he's getting about 29, 30. He's had 4 games since January 3rd, so over the last 3 weeks, of 35 or more minutes played, and a couple other games where, you know, he's at 30 or above that, and a couple other games where he's around that. He's getting the opportunities like he's gotten in the last 10, actually longer than that. If you're going back to December 26th, he's had double-digit amount of field goal attempts in 9 or 10 games. And granted, some of those were like with injuries or whatever the case may be. So like we can't go off of all of those from back then. But even last time out, he was 4 for 10. He was 3 for 7 from 3. The 3-point attempts are a big thing here. Like the 3-point volume is there for Jaylen Wells in these games. He's averaging 6 3-point attempts over his last 10. And he's shooting a good percentage, shooting 44%. So I just look at this and I'm like, man, this is a guy that's averaging 14 points over his last 10 games. Yes, that's inflated by the 30-point game, but even if you remove that, like, he's still hitting this number, and you're giving it to me at plus money. So I'll take a decent shooting performance, give you a couple threes, and give me a couple layups, and, you know, hopefully you get to the free throw line and we're good. We can get to 12.
I love every bit of this, and on my local book, we're a little more limited in the state of Florida. But Jaylen Wells at over 11.5 is at minus 105, so not quite plus money, but we're close.
Yeah.
This is the highest total on the board for tomorrow. Right now, sitting at 242.5 for Pelicans Grizzlies. One of the things that I like, just thinking about this strategically, for any over can get dashed because a team that you just experienced this with Giannis, the guy that you're betting on. You just don't need him anymore at the end of the game. With rookies or younger players, coaches tend to be slower to rip them out of the lineup in a blowout. We're looking at a 12-point spread with a really sky-high total, and so that should help because I don't think Jaylen Wells isn't going to get the hook as quick as a John Morant would.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And hopefully this isn't a blowout, obviously, but if it is, then the hope is like he does his work early because yes, as you mentioned, experiences with Giannis where he was on track to smash that 16.5 rebounds assists if he just not started the fourth quarter because he probably wasn't going to do that anyway. But if the Heat just stayed within, I don't know, 18 points for a little bit longer, maybe he would have gotten it. But it wasn't meant to be. Also had some potential assists that didn't go through. So thank you to his teammates for that. But yeah, I think Jaylen Wells at plus money here, like this is something you got to give a look. And look, even though like the Pelicans may scare you off, as you mentioned, the high total is also encouraging. This is going to be an up-tempo game. It's going to have a lot of three-pointers. Jaylen Wells will be part of that. So I like the over, even though it feels like it might be a trap, but we're going to take it and see what happens.
So I'm on the Portland Trailblazers +5 against the Charlotte Hornets. We both looked at this game and said, well, how could we possibly stay away when the Blazers are playing the Hornets in Charlotte on a Friday night? The Blazers haven't been all that bad on second nights of back-to-back, so it's one of the things I like to look at. What is your record when you play on a back-to-back? And young teams can be a little bit, especially young bad teams, can be tough to trust. But they're 3-1 straight up in their last 4 back-to-backs this season. They've been on the East Coast since Tuesday, so this isn't a big travel disadvantage for Portland. And the Hornets, without LaMelo, now he has not been ruled out yet, but this is a wrist injury. I'm guessing he doesn't play through it. And you might as well just take the money line if LaMelo doesn't play. The Hornets are 1-10 this year with LaMelo out of the lineup. So with him questionable, they just got the news that Brandon Miller is out for the season as well. The vibes are low, and they are in for Cooper Flagg. I think Portland would love to get a top lottery pick, but it feels like they want to see what they have with the roster that's in front of them. I love the way they've been playing lately. They won 2 straight coming into Orlando. Tough environment with Franz Wagner back in the fold, and they laid into them. So I like Portland to keep it rolling. The Southeast Slayers cover a 5-point spread.
That Brandon Miller news, just awful. And with Charlotte, I feel like, it doesn't look like my over on them for the season is going to hit. But next year, I think they'll have it together. They're laying a foundation. They have the right coach. I feel like Charles Lee is going to be good, and they just need some players who are going to stay healthy as well, because health is a big part of this. Because they actually started the season pretty well. I don't remember from 6-8 or 7-9, something along those lines, and I was like, oh man, we actually might get the 30 wins, 35 wins, or whatever. And yeah, it just LaMelo got hurt, and that was kind of it.
Well, and both of these teams have been pretty good against the spread this year.
Yeah.
Charlotte is basically 40%, so they're one of the top teams, 54%. And the Portland Trailblazers are right behind them at 53.5. So these two teams, if you're betting them every night, which, why wouldn't you? You're coming out ahead. And so these are two teams that have been covering spreads left and right. I just trust where Portland is a little bit more. And I think a lot of people are going to look at this and go, oh, West Coast team traveling out east. It's really not like that. The flight from Orlando to Charlotte is like an hour, So I think they might already be there by now for as we're recording this. But you like the totals. Talk to me about the under here.
Yeah, one book, it just moved from 222 to 221, but there's still a 222 out there as of now. If you can get 222, that's great. I'm probably okay with 221, but we're going under regardless. Charlotte has, by percentage, the most unders in the NBA this season when they're at home. Charlotte, as you just alluded to, is at home. They have 30% of the time gone over at home. That's it. I mean, 70% of their games have gone under. And with Portland, a team who's, I mean, I was on their under in their game today, as you mentioned, and that one was not even close. Portland has the third most unders as a road team by percentage in the NBA. So you have two teams with a lot of unders given the spot, given their body of work. Portland also 5 unders in 7 games on the second night of back-to-backs.
Ooh, that's
Portland,
nice.
Portland, yeah. So at 221, I'm probably fine. This is a game where I feel like if it goes as the season has gone, so to speak, and if this is just sort of standard and, Josh Green isn't hitting 10 threes for whatever reason, or Scoot Henderson isn't dropping 42 points, like nothing abnormal happens, we should be fine here. I'm probably okay with 221. I'm probably okay even if it goes to like a 220.5. This could be a game where both teams struggle to even get to 100 until late. If I have concerns, it would be just outlier performances. It's the NBA. It's January. Stuff happens. And also, like, overtime is not inconceivable. So, like, this is a game where, like, you could be sweating it out. You could be sweating out the total, and then all of a sudden it's like it's 102 to 101, and Charlotte's down, and there's 8 seconds left, and then LaMelo Ball just might send it into overtime, and it's like, oh boy, you better hope that they stay under. Like, I could totally see that, which also brings me to say, like, if you do, because Matt Moore has done this throughout the year, this is not an overtime spot that I hate. If you did want to sprinkle on this game, potentially go into overtime, I'm not sure what the number is. I'm actually looking for it right now, but I'm not.
That's such a tough bet to make. Let me support your. I want to support your under real quick as you look that up. So I was looking at Charlotte lately. I've been betting Charlotte a lot recently. They've been covering spreads, and
what a sentence.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do in this world,
From the person who wrote about, hey, I think they can win 35 games this year at +2, whatever it was at the time. But injuries, man, injuries. Anyway.
But they've been playing good defense as of late, and that's the thing that's helped carry them. They are top 10 in the NBA over the last 10 games. They are sandwiched between teams like the Indiana Pacers, who have been red hot, the Sacramento Kings, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Charlotte's turned it on. This is not a top 10 defensive team, but to the point of covering spreads, if you got them at 12.5 against the Memphis Grizzlies, I unfortunately pushed that night. They covered that game. They covered the game prior against the Dallas Mavericks. They covered the game prior to that against the Chicago Bulls. So you have 2 teams now that have covered 3 straight games, taking each other on head-to-head. And they're getting it done with defense. Also with Portland, steals and blocks, part of their specialty.
Yes.
And that should help in terms of getting you where you need to be in the total. And I cannot trust Charlotte as a favorite.
Yeah,
I like betting them, but I want them as nice, juicy, double-digit underdogs. Not as a 4 to 5 point favorite. That's a little outlandish to me. Did you find the number you were looking for?
No, not available yet, but I'm sure it's going to be 4 digits. So it'll be a sprinkle if anything. Also worth noting on the Portland side, because we did mention Charlotte. On the Portland side, DeAndre Ayton and Donovan Clingan both did not play Thursday against the Orlando Magic, and Robert Williams did. I don't know if Robert Williams is going to play back-to-back, so the center situation is going to be weird. I feel like that may actually help, hurt the under if no center is available. Hopefully you just have scoring competence. Robert Williams, by the way, had 4 blocks tonight, so hopefully you weren't playing him in fantasy, because the guy that I was playing, Brandon, picked him up, did not start him. Oh, dodged the bullet there.
What a waste. What a waste of a smart move. But it sounds like we both need LaMelo not to play. So, LaMelo, if you're listening, go ahead and heal up that wrist. If you want to tail
or just dominate the ball and then just keep shooting with like 2 seconds left, because he's done a bunch of that. They play at Charlotte. That's another thing. Charlotte plays a very slow pace.
They do.
Portland too. Charlotte plays I thought they would play a lot faster this year. They're just not. And now with Brandon Miller, I'm not sure they're going to either. Without Brandon Miller, that is.
My only concern with LaMelo is the narrative play of he was not named as an Eastern Conference starter, even though I think he led the league in votes. And so guys like that, like they get up after getting a snub like that. So I do worry about that a little bit, but ball stopping, that's his brand. And I like the Blazers plus the points either way. And it sounds like you're kind of good whether LaMelo plays or not. If you want to tail any of the bets that we've talked about here on Buckets, we've got quick slip links in the episode description for you. It's super easy. Just click on those quick slip links and a bet slip will open up in your sportsbook app, and you can go ahead and tail these. When you are truly comfortable, you do everything better, and that includes betting on teams like the Portland Trailblazers. So go get yourself some Tommy John underwear. To recap, Brian has under 222 in the Blazers Hornets games, as well as Jaylen Wells over 11.5 points scored. I am taking Blazers +5 against the Charlotte Hornets. You can find me in the app at BK Picks, and at Bryan Fonseca is how you can find my guy over here. Let's get buckets. Talk to you next time.